let me ask you, what is the relevance of Vladimir Putin being kicked out of the removed from the World Economic Forum website? I mean, we're talking about financial currencies. We're talking about the World Economic Forum. It feels like I've got a bunch of points that seem like they're connected. The World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund, the SWIFT payment system, Russia being, starting a war, then being booted. What's the connection here? I mean, was Russia involved in the liberal economic order? Is he not involved in that? Or
I don't think Putin is, but I think that this will be an opportunity for the introduction of, it potentially could be, I should say, for the introduction of central banking digital currencies, which I describe as vouchers.
But it sounds like what Putin is doing is going to help make that a reality.
Yeah.
So it sounds like that makes it sound like it's one big plot.
Well, you don't need to see. This is the thing. We don't need to worry about intentions just to understand what the consequences of these actions are.
Yeah, agreed.
And that's where people get stuck. They get stuck on intentions, and I'm like, well, it doesn't matter what Putin intended. If the consequences of kicking Russia out of the SWIFT system mean that you end up with this financial money supply division on the planet, you then have got these blocks, Eurasia and Oceania, and what that leads to is, if you can no longer trade with Russian banks, when you're buying Russian gas and you're Germany, and you can no longer buy from Russia because you can't pay them.
Bitcoin.
And already we see Bitcoin flooding into Ukraine to fund the opposition, right?
Yep.
Now, how do you control that? Because one thing we do know is Bitcoin isn't in the interests of the banking establishment. So that's where you then...
Or is it?
Well, you tell me. I think that what they would want to do is introduce central banking digital currencies. That's what they've told us they want. Yeah.
I think there's a good possibility when you look at the prominence of Bitcoin over the past 10 years, it would not be hard for a nation to gain enough control over the network to create faux centralization. A lot of people say, oh, that can't happen. I don't believe it. But what's the current market cap for Bitcoin? Do you know? Is it 1 trillion?
My guess is 2.1 trillion. Let's find out. No, it's going to be less than that. 1.9 trillion.
You could have market manipulation, right?
Yep.
You can manipulate the market there.
We absolutely do. China's been doing it.
It's
like
1.93 trillion.
1.93
No, that's
trillion.
the global market cap of all crypto right now.
Of all crypto.
So Bitcoin market cap is 832 billion.
832 billion. So let's go back 7 years. The market cap of crypto was substantially less. The US, NATO countries could have easily bought in and controlled more than 51% of the Bitcoin network, which would give them control over how it works effectively. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I'm trying to simplify it. The point is, it just requires immense managerial power. But from the early stages, we could see the true power of Bitcoin. I've long speculated and even told all of my crazy anarchist and libertarian friends, I'm like, what if you're buying into Bitcoin? What if that's the global currency? It's public ledger. Anyone can track. The AI systems, their computers, they'll figure out what your address is in seconds, and there's nothing you can do to stop them. I got to tell you, man, I have seen brilliant private investigatorial work from individuals. There's an individual who was doxxed in the UK. He was posting on social media. How did they find out who he was? They knew the sound of his voice. So they looked at the average. They took a bunch of his posts and then found the average time of posting. And they said, this shows the individual is in this region of the UK. Yeah. They then looked for a person who fit key details, background, age, interests, hobbies. A human being did all of that work. Imagine what a computer can do when you're doing transactions. They'll instantly know what part of the world you're in. From there, they break it down. They know what you're buying because they know what everyone else is buying. The Bitcoin ledger is publicly trackable. And when they talk about Zcash and Monero, which are two cryptos which are supposedly secure, we learned that the FBI was able to track Monero payments when they arrested that woman, Crocodile of Wall Street lady. Yeah, I think I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Bitcoin.
So you're talking about the privacy concerns on the ledger, but what you still can't do is control the supply. I mean, you can manipulate the price.
You can control the supply
of Bitcoin.
It's called the 51% attack. If you control at more than...
No, I mean the overall amount of Bitcoin in the world. Once it's hit its maximum cap, right? You can't just print more Bitcoin once that's done.
Right. You know? Bitcoin...
Unlike fiat currency.
But with a 51% attack, you can effectively do anything you want.
Yeah.
So if you control more than half of the nodes, then you basically tell the fork what to do. Now, of course, if you go too hard, you'll create a hard fork and it'll split the blockchain in half. We've seen that happen on accident before. What I'm saying is, I don't know if it's true. A lot of people say, no, Tim, calm down. This can never happen. But if the U.S. and Western powers, or even China and Russia, bought in very, very early on and have maintained growth of their Bitcoin nodes, they could absolutely control more than half the network, which gives them control of the entirety of the system.
So I think what you're describing is the compared to what can be done with fiat money in a sovereign nation, is probably a less worse case scenario than what we currently have with the control of the money supply.
Well, that's horrible what's going on right now.
Yeah.
They can print 800 billion of fiat and then just buy all the Bitcoin.
Now, there's also concerns about quantum computing, being able to crack private keys, in which case the system is just a facade.
That though could be met. So when we reach quantum power in that way and it's sustainable, I think you also end up with quantum encryption that can actually. The technology improves in its encryption capabilities, not just in its hacking capabilities.
Exactly.
Quantum resistance.
Right. Yeah. So the Bitcoin community, all the people involved could choose to hard fork on purpose with new resilience and new technology. I will say this. It is my personal opinion that Bitcoin will become a dominant global standard for exchange and store of value in some meaningful way. I've long thought that was the case, and that's why I've said, how do you know this is not the global currency? That's something they want. But I'll put it very simply. I've long said I believe one Bitcoin will become worth $1 million, equivalent buying power.
Yep.
I believe we're on track for that. I don't know exactly when or how, but I do believe that, and I've certainly bought my share of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies because I truly believe it. I'm not telling anybody what to do. I'm just saying what I've done. I believe there comes a time we're watching what's happening in Russia. Every incentive is being given to them to back their financial markets using Bitcoin as the facilitation mechanism.
That's the consequence of what's happening.
Or a central bank token, which is worse than, it's different than a crypto because it's not on a blockchain. It's just a central bank. They have it on a ledger, but it's a digital currency that they can track. It's less
That's
secure.
a disaster.
I know.
Because I could tell you from there, this is what I'm worried about, because I could say, right, you're not going to buy meat this week. You've had your quota, which you can't, even if you can manipulate the Bitcoin price, if you control 51%, what you can't do is say, right, you can't use the tiny bit of Bitcoin that you own to buy that meat. You have to buy bugs.
It depends on if they can gain control of the exchanges, which they mostly can. So if people are, I'll put it this way, they can ban your address from sending or receiving through certain exchanges. So they can say all of our financial institutions and mechanism, the companies that facilitate the exchange, we won't allow it. But the blockchain still exists, which means you could easily find someone who just says, I'll do a direct address transfer outside of an exchange.
They could do something like a centrally controlled economy could do something where if you have crypto, you have to buy NFTs as vouchers, and then you use those NFTs for specific things. So you can only use those NFTs for food, for liquor, for cars.
The currency would need to be fungible. But they can control the system. It doesn't need to be, unique tokens specifically, right?
I think this is the. So we've got the Chancellor of Exchequer in the UK, Rishi Sunak, openly declaring this that as the leader of the G7, they're going to introduce central banking digital currencies, right? And this is what I'm calling as vouchers. And so fiat money pretty much at some stage is going to come to an end. And what you've described as the potential dangers and pitfalls of Bitcoin specifically, or crypto generally, I still think is a least worst case scenario when you can consider what can happen.
I agree
with CBDCs.
It sounds like
I just want to say real quick. I'm sort of playing devil's advocate on the potential risks of Bitcoin. I genuinely think it's better. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's going to become $1 million per Bitcoin.
But it's good that you're doing it because it's like, don't let a crisis go to waste. And what's happening is the bankers are looking at Bitcoin as a crisis, and they're trying to make sure that they can turn it into an opportunity. Just like Joe Biden encouraged us to do last night in his campaign speech.
Mm-hmm. I didn't watch it. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, they called it a State of the Union, but it was just a campaign speech. At the very end, he was like, "And what? By the way, the State of the Union is strong. Yeah. The State of the Union is strong because the people are strong. And then, strong. And everyone's like, yeah, we're strong.
And we're going to end cancer."
Do you see that joke where
you got to watch it?
At the end, he says, "Go get him," and everyone's like, "What? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
who's that?" And then
he's inciting an insurrection.
That's
what during the standing ovation, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then someone I think from the Daily Wire said That was just the part that of the prompter that Biden wasn't supposed to read. It was instructions to his handlers. Go get him.
Oh, that's hilarious.
We were debating if he said, when he was saying the Ukrainian people, at one point he said the Uranian people. And people like,
He said
Iranian,
Iranian.
the closest real word to the sound he made is Iranian, but it sounded like Uranian. So I was making fun of him like he was talking about Uranus.
I think Uranus.
That's how I say it.
Yeah.
He said Iranian.
Russia will never get the hearts and minds of the Iranian people.
The Iranian people.
Yeah.
No matter how many
Never
tanks
say
they
never.
have outside Kiev.
But here's the important.
Oh, yeah.
point
I want
here.
to talk back about him splitting the country.
Why do we believe he meant to say Ukrainian? Who is the person who gets to decide what Joe Biden really meant? If Joe Biden, so he was meeting with the G7 and he said, we got, troops in Libya. We're going to be sending military. He meant Syria. What would happen? What would happen if Joe Biden's in a situation room meeting and he's like, we got to send these weapons to the Iranian people, and then someone was like, are you, Mr. President, are you sure? Yeah, we're gonna send $30 billion, some fighter jets to the Iranian people, and they'll go, whatever you say, sir, I'll make it happen. And then breaking news: Iran receives massive payload of cash from U.S. government.
Dude, it's not even a joke.
But hold on. Imagine the alternative. Joe Biden says, we're going to send a pallet of cash to the Ukrainian people. And someone goes, he meant Iranian people.
and then they decide for themselves.
Exactly.
When
Exactly.
it's hitting the fan and it's wartime, make a decision now, and he says the wrong word, that's death.
But that's why it's so dangerous to have a president that effectively is mentally impaired.
No, and he actually we were talking
That's
about
the
this.
most polite way I've ever
It's
heard
a
someone
very
describe
polite
it.
way
Yeah.
of putting it, and we were sort of joking about this the other day. We were watching his State of the Union, poking fun at him. It is actually genuinely sad. The fact that we were all talking about this after the show, this is probably the best speech he's given in his entire presidency, and he's slurring every single word. He sounds intoxicated.
Yeah.
And then that's as good as it gets.
I mean, I remember
for him.
when Trump would give speeches and make such mistakes, there would be viral videos.
Exactly. And they were
Well-
never even close to as bad as Biden's mistakes. Like Biden's best, and I'm not saying Trump didn't have some gaffes, but like Biden's best day is what we saw yesterday. And he sounded drunk. He really did. I'm not trying to be mean.
Yeah, it sounded
and
like
if
he was
anyone's
swimming
going to come
through.
at me and say that that's really insensitive to say about the president of the United States, you are acknowledging that he did sound like that.
Oh, that's a good point.
He did. Right?
Realistically,
He did.
now I want to just touch back on Ukraine really quick. So you think that he's going to try and? I think I've been thinking almost every day he's going to split the country in half on that river.
Yeah.
That reservoir.
Yeah,
What's
yeah,
do you know what the name of the river is? I can't figure it out. Such a reservoir is.
It's referred as Upper River, but who knows?
Papa.
But there's the east and the west, right?
Yeah.
So the side that's on the Russian side, that's the east of that river, will probably go to. Look, I say probably. Let's hope there's no World War III, right? So if
Yes.
look, ultimately Putin's gone in there now, and he's not just going to leave that, right? He's gone in there for a reason, for whatever reason. So probably this is the outcome that it will end on, which is that you'd end up with a split Ukraine.
And Kiev, like the Kievan Rus. I think that was the
Yeah.
history of the Russians was Kievan Rus.
Yeah,
So
and
he
it's
wants
in his
Kiev.
backyard, right? So, Bay of Pigs. I mean, America's done all of this stuff. Iran-Contra affair,
I know. I want to speak out against it, but like to sit in silence while my brethren are conquering and kicking doors in Iraq. I don't know if they're still doing that, but they were.
If our president is, as you described it, mentally impaired,
Indeed, yes.
can't speak straight, how is he going to prevent Russia from doing whatever it is Russia intends to do? Is it because someone else is in charge?
Well, no, but he's not going to. If you know, what has he done? I mean, look.
Well, they canceled this ICBM test, which is in some ways good.
But that's not preventing Russia.
Right.
That's just not escalating a conflict.
Right.
Which is good, by the way. I'm happy. But no one's going to stop what Putin's decided to do unless you want war with Putin. And this is the problem, that you've got an option right now. Putin went in and called everybody's bluff. Now, either we engage directly with Russia, and that's World War III, which I don't think is a good idea, in particular because we don't have the moral high ground. Our own countries have gone and invaded countries. And when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, the last thing we expected was for Russia to attack us directly because we invaded Iraq or Afghanistan.
You know what narrative I really love?
Yeah.
There's a story coming out where it said Vladimir Putin believed the invasion would last only 15 days and the government would collapse and they would come in and it would be clean. And I was like, yeah. And we thought we'd be greeted as liberators. The same narrative.
Yeah. This is it. It's just people are very, very out of touch. And I find it amazing how there is now it's expected that we take a line on this that is this word jingoism, right? It's a very jingoistic line that we're expected to take, almost as if we must back direct action against against Russia.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.